New exclusive photographs, by far the best yet, are in from the Titanic. For most of this century, that huge passenger liner has been a dead...
All those documentaries and Hollywood movies, but there's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
The frigid depths of the North Atlantic, where light has not penetrated for over a century, lies the most famous shipwreck in human history.
We're going to look at one of the most famous shipwrecks of all time, the focus of all those documentaries and Hollywood movies. But there's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
The RMS Titanic has rested in her watery grave since that fateful night of April 15th, 1912, taking with her not only 1,500 souls but countless untold stories. For decades, we've pieced together the Titanic's final hours through survivor accounts, investigations, and physical evidence. Yet in 2022, an unimaginable discovery threatened to rewrite history. A camera preserved in the darkness of the ocean floor, potentially containing the last images ever taken aboard the doomed vessel. What would these photographs reveal? What secrets might they unlock about the disaster that has captivated generations? The answers would prove more extraordinary than anyone could have anticipated. The North Atlantic is notoriously unforgiving, a realm of perpetual darkness where the pressure would crush a human body in seconds. Yet it was into this hostile environment that the OceanGate expedition ventured in June 2022, equipped with their submersible Titan and cutting-edge underwater imaging technology. What began as a routine documentation mission to the Titanic wreckage soon became one of the most significant discoveries in maritime archaeology. The expedition team, led by oceanographer Dr. Elena Karras, had deployed remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, equipped with high-definition cameras into the debris field surrounding the Titanic's hull. These ROVs, tethered to the main submersible, could navigate into spaces too dangerous or small for human exploration. It was ROV-3, piloted by technician Marcus Wells, that first spotted something unusual protruding from beneath a collapsed section of the first-class promenade deck. At first, I thought it was just another piece of debris, Wells later recounted, but something about its shape caught my attention. I moved in closer, and that's when I realized what we were looking at. The object, partially obscured by sediment, had the unmistakable rectangular shape of an early 20th century camera. The team watched in stunned silence as the ROV's lights illuminated what appeared to be a remarkably well-preserved Kodak Brownie camera, a popular model from the era when Titanic sailed. We immediately understood the significance, Dr. Karras said during the press conference that would later announce the find to the world. If this camera contained undeveloped film, and if that film could somehow be preserved, we might be looking at the last images ever taken aboard Titanic before she sank. News of the discovery spread rapidly through the scientific community, igniting both excitement and skepticism. Many experts considered it impossible that photographic film could survive 110 years of saltwater immersion. Yet the unique conditions at the Titanic site, the near-freezing temperatures, high pressure, and low oxygen levels, had already preserved many artifacts beyond all expectations. The camera's journey through time. The retrieval of the camera required extraordinary precision. The team constructed a custom pressure-maintained container filled with seawater from the exact location to prevent any sudden changes in environment that might damage the artifact. As the camera was carefully brought to the surface, preliminary examination confirmed it was indeed a Kodak Brownie, specifically the Pocket Brownie model introduced in 1910, a relatively expensive and fashionable camera that would have been owned by a passenger of means. Dr. Harriet Zhao, the expedition's historical photography expert, identified unique markings on the camera's leather case. These monogrammed initials, BG, matched only one passenger on the Titanic's manifest. Benjamin Guggenheim, the American businessman and mining magnate who famously changed into his finest evening wear as the ship was sinking, declaring he would go down like a gentleman. Guggenheim's story is among the most poignant of the disaster. Traveling in first class with his valet and mistress, he had helped women and children into lifeboats before retreating to the grand staircase with his valet, both dressed in evening attire, where they were last seen sipping brandy as the waters rose. That his camera survived when he did not created a haunting connection to the past. But how had the camera endured for over a century underwater? The answer lay in a remarkable confluence of preservative factors. First, the camera had fallen into an area where silt quickly covered it, protecting it from the worst effects of the corrosive salt water. Second, the extreme cold just above freezing dramatically slowed chemical degradation processes. Third, the camera itself featured a remarkably watertight design with its film chamber sealed by multiple gaskets. The Brownie wasn't designed to be waterproof, explained Dr. Zhao, but its construction inadvertently created several barriers against water intrusion. The film compartment was especially well protected, with overlapping seals that formed an almost hermetic chamber when closed properly. Microbiological analysis revealed another surprise. The camera's leather case had been treated with tannic acid during manufacturing, which had unintentionally inhibited bacterial growth that would normally contribute to degradation. This combination of factors, environmental, structural, and chemical, had created a preservation miracle. Most astonishing was the condition of the film inside. The Kodak 120 roll film used in the Brownie was designed with multiple protective layers, including a gelatin emulsion that, while normally water-soluble, had undergone a chemical transformation under pressure that actually created a protective shell around the silver halide crystals containing the latent images. It's not that the film didn't degrade, noted restoration specialist Thomas Wilkins, but rather that it degraded in such a specific way that the core image information remained recoverable. We've never seen anything like it in underwater archaeology. It's as if the ocean itself conspired to preserve these images, developing the impossible. Extracting images from the century-old, waterlogged film presented unprecedented challenges that required entirely new restoration techniques. The task fell to a specialized team at the Photographic Preservation Institute led by Dr. Maya Tanaka, who had previously recovered images from fire-damaged negatives found at archaeological sites. When the film arrived, we faced a fundamental problem, Dr. Tanaka explained. Traditional development was impossible because the emulsion had transformed into something entirely different from what photography chemistry was designed to process. We needed to invent new methods. The team began by creating a three-dimensional map of the film roll using neutron tomography, a technique that allowed them to visualize the internal structure without physically unwinding the delicate film. This revealed that approximately 24 exposures had been taken, with the film wound to the 16th frame when the camera was lost. The first breakthrough came when Dr. Tanaka's team discovered that while the film's gelatin layer had been altered by seawater, the silver halide crystals containing the actual image data remained in their original positions. They developed a multispectral imaging system that could detect the minute differences in crystal density representing the original exposures. We essentially had to read the film rather than develop it, said imaging specialist Dr. Rodrigo Vargas. We used algorithms similar to those developed for astronomical imaging to enhance contrast and extract data from what looked like a uniform gray mass to the naked eye. The process required the construction of a specialized chamber where the film could remain immersed in a carefully formulated solution that prevented further degradation while allowing the imaging equipment to penetrate the outer layers. Each exposure required up to 72 hours of continuous scanning, with supercomputers processing the data to reconstruct the images. The preservation team faced another critical decision, whether to physically preserve the film or focus exclusively on extracting the images. We ultimately chose both, Dr. Tanaka said. We developed a method to stabilize the film in its current state after imaging, essentially freezing it in time by replacing the water molecules with a synthetic polymer that maintains the exact structure. This dual approach meant that future technologies might extract even more detail from the original film. Temperature controlled to 20 degrees C and sealed in an argon-filled container, the film would remain available for study by future generations with potentially more advanced recovery techniques. First glimpses of tragedy. The first successfully recovered image from the Guggenheim camera emerged after months of painstaking work, a ghostly, grayscale photograph that initially appeared as little more than blurry shapes. Yet as enhancement techniques were applied, the unmistakable outline of Titanic's forward deck came into focus, with passengers gathered near the bow. Timestamps embedded in the film structure, combined with lighting analysis, place this image at approximately 4:30 p.m. on April 14, 1912, just hours before the collision. What makes this image historically significant is that it shows passengers congregating at the bow, apparently watching ice flows, explained maritime historian Dr. Robert Ballard, who had discovered the Titanic wreck in 1985. This supports accounts that passengers were aware of ice in the vicinity well before the collision, contradicting claims that no warnings reached the passengers. The second image proved even more revealing, a dinner scene in the first-class dining saloon showing tables adorned with elaborate place settings and passengers in formal evening wear. Facial recognition software comparing the image against known photographs of Titanic passengers identified several notable individuals, including John Jacob Astor IV, the wealthiest man aboard, and Isidore Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store with his wife, Ida. What struck researchers was the evident relaxed atmosphere just hours before disaster. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light of the chandeliers, servers in white gloves attended to diners, and a small orchestra played in the corner. The exact moment captured, approximately 8:15 p.m., represented perhaps the last normal social gathering before chaos erupted. The third image showed Captain Edward Smith conferring with an officer on the bridge, time-stamped at approximately 9:40 p.m. The body language is revealing, noted behavioral analyst Dr. Samantha Richards. There's tension evident in the captain's posture, suggesting he had already received ice warnings and was concerned, despite maintaining his public composure. Perhaps most chilling was the fourth image, a photograph taken from the boat deck showing a massive dark shape on the horizon, barely distinguishable in the moonless night. Enhancement revealed the unmistakable silhouette of an iceberg, approximately 2 miles distant. The timestamp 11:35 p.m., just 5 minutes before impact. This is the only known photograph of the actual iceberg before collision, Dr. Karras explained. It appears Guggenheim was on deck, perhaps having stepped out for air, and noticed something on the horizon worth photographing. He couldn't have known he was documenting the object that would soon seal Titanic's fate. The fifth image showed water already entering the ship's forward compartments, with crewmen frantically working to close watertight doors. Timestamped at 12:15 a.m. on April 15th, this photograph captured the moment when many passengers still believed the situation was merely an inconvenience rather than a mortal danger. Faces of the doomed. The sixth recovered photograph delivered the most emotionally powerful images yet. A group portrait taken in the first-class lounge at approximately 12:45 a.m. after the collision, but before the full evacuation had begun. The expressions captured in this image tell a complex story. Some faces show bemusement, others concern, and a few, notably among the officers present, reveal barely concealed terror. This photograph represents a pivotal psychological moment, explained Dr. Margaret Chen, a historian specializing in disaster psychology. We're witnessing the exact transition between denial and recognition. Some passengers still believed the ship was unsinkable, while others were beginning to understand the gravity of their situation. Facial recognition technology identified 17 individuals in this image. Among them was the camera's owner, Benjamin Guggenheim, his expression unreadable as he stood with one hand resting on a chair. Beside him was his valet, Victor Gilio, who would perish alongside his employer. Also identified were Thomas Andrews, Titanic's designer who knew better than anyone the ship's fatal wounds, and Archibald Butt, military aide to President Taft. What made this image particularly poignant was that, of the 17 identifiable individuals, 15 would not survive the night. Each face frozen in time represented a life about to end, men who would soon make the decision to step back, allowing women and children to board the insufficient lifeboats. The seventh image showed the increasingly tilted deck at approximately 1:30 a.m., with passengers now clearly in distress. A lifeboat is being loaded in the foreground, with Officer Murdoch visible, directing the evacuation. In the background, the ship's band can be seen setting up their instruments, the beginning of their legendary final performance. This image confirms survivor accounts that claimed the band played during loading of the lifeboats, noted Titanic scholar Dr. William Hoffman. Their calm demeanor amid growing chaos undoubtedly helped maintain order during the evacuation's early stages. Perhaps most heart-wrenching was the 8th photograph, showing a young mother wrapping her child in extra layers of clothing before placing her in a lifeboat. Identified as Mrs. Madeline Astor, 18-year-old pregnant wife of John Jacob Astor, the image captures her preparing her companion's 10-year-old daughter for survival. Mrs. Astor would survive, the child's father would not. These aren't just historical documents, Dr. Chen observed. They're intimate portraits of human beings in their final hours, making decisions about how to face death, who to save, and how to maintain dignity amid catastrophe. In many cases, we're looking at the last images ever taken of these individuals. The recovered photographs humanize the disaster in ways that passenger lists and statistics never could. Each face told a story of wealth and privilege that ultimately proved useless against nature's power, of social codes that determined who would live and who would die, and of individual responses to the realization that life was about to end. Evidence contradicting official accounts. The 9th and 10th photographs recovered from Guggenheim's camera triggered seismic shifts in Titanic historiography, challenging several established narratives that had persisted for over a century. Taken from the boat deck at approximately 1:45 a.m., these images showed the critical phase of the evacuation with startling clarity, documenting details that contradicted survivor testimonies and official inquiry findings. Most significantly, the 9th image revealed Officer William Murdoch clearly allowing men into Lifeboat 1, which was launched half empty with only 12 people aboard despite a capacity for 40. This directly contradicted official accounts that maintained a strict women and children first policy had been followed on the starboard side under Murdoch's command. This photograph resolves one of the major controversies surrounding the evacuation, explained maritime law historian Dr. Nathan Isaacs. It shows that Murdoch was evidently making pragmatic decisions based on who was present at each lifeboat rather than adhering rigidly to an evacuation protocol. This likely explains why survival rates varied so dramatically between different areas of the ship. The image also captured Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, helping passengers into a lifeboat, not aggressively boarding ahead of others, as some survivors had claimed. His facial expression shows clear distress rather than the self-preservation portrayed in many accounts. Ismay became a scapegoat after the disaster, noted Dr. Isaacs. These images suggest his role during the evacuation was more complex than the villain narrative that emerged. He appears to be actively assisting rather than prioritizing his own survival, at least at this stage. Even more controversial was the 10th photograph showing Captain Smith on the bridge at 1:55 a.m., well after the time he was reported to have released his crew from duty with the words, "Each man for himself." The captain appears to be consulting with Officer Lightoller while reviewing what looks like navigation charts, suggesting organized efforts to manage the disaster continued later than previously thought. This entirely rewrites our understanding of the command structure's breakdown, said Dr. Karras. Rather than an early abandonment of authority, it appears the officers maintained an operational chain of command much longer into the disaster. This would explain the relatively organized evacuation despite the chaotic circumstances. Another significant revelation came from the background of this image, which showed the ship's stern with all lights still functioning at a time when survivors had reported widespread power failures. This suggested the electrical systems remained operational longer than believed, which would have implications for why distress signals may have continued later than recorded. Perhaps most disturbing was evidence visible in the 11th photograph of lifeboat mismanagement. The image clearly shows Lifeboat 7, the first to be launched, waiting in the water nearly 20 yards from the ship's side, not actively seeking survivors or moving toward other lifeboats to consolidate passengers and return for more, as had been claimed by its occupants. This visual evidence forces us to reconsider survival testimonies, explained psychological historian Dr. Chen. Trauma and survival guilt likely shaped many accounts, particularly regarding individual actions during the crisis. These photographs provide objective evidence unclouded by emotional experience or the need to justify one's survival. The ethics of disaster photography. The publication of the Titanic photographs sparked intense debate about the ethics of disaster imagery and historical privacy. Many descendants of Titanic victims expressed mixed emotions about seeing their ancestors' final moments displayed in museums and splashed across magazine covers. This tension between historical significance and respect for the dead raised profound questions about how we memorialize tragedy. These photographs show people who had no opportunity to consent to having their final hours documented and displayed, argued Dr. Eleanor Montgomery, an ethicist specializing in historical photography. Yet they also represent invaluable historical evidence that belongs in some sense to humanity's collective memory. This creates a genuine ethical dilemma. The Titanic Historical Society established an ethics committee to develop guidelines for the photographs' display, ultimately recommending that exhibitions include consultation with the descendants where possible and contextual information emphasizing the humanity of those depicted. They also advised against using the images in commercial merchandise or advertising. Not all families felt the same way about the photographs. Madeleine Astor's descendants expressed gratitude for the image showing her courage in crisis, while the Guggenheim family found comfort in evidence that Benjamin had indeed faced death with the dignity described in survivor accounts. Conversely, some families filed legal challenges to prevent public display of images showing their ancestors in moments of distress. These varied responses demonstrate there's no one-size-fits-all approach to historical trauma, noted Dr. Montgomery. Each family processes this visual evidence differently based on how their ancestors' story has been part of their family narrative. Museums faced practical challenges in exhibiting the photographs responsibly. The National Maritime Museum in Greenwich pioneered an approach that displayed the images alongside oral histories from descendants, creating dialogue between historical evidence and family memory. They also implemented warning signs and separate viewing areas to allow visitors to choose whether to view the more distressing images. Digital access created additional complications. While institutions could control physical exhibition contexts, once digitized, the photographs circulated online without contextual information or ethical framing. This prompted development of digital watermarking systems that embedded historical context directly into image files, ensuring the photographs couldn't be separated from information about their sensitive nature. Journalists covering the discovery faced their own ethical questions about which images to publish and how to frame them. Most major publications adopted guidelines similar to those used for modern disaster photography, focusing on images that informed rather than exploited and avoiding unnecessary depictions of distress. What makes these photographs ethically complex is their dual nature, explained Dr. Lydia Patel, curator of photography at the Smithsonian. They're simultaneously historical evidence, artistic works by Guggenheim, memento mori of the deceased, and family artifacts. Each perspective suggests different ethical obligations. The discussion extended beyond the Titanic photos to establish broader principles for handling historical disaster imagery. The resulting Greenwich Protocol became a framework for museums worldwide, balancing historical significance, educational value, respect for the dead, and the perspectives of living descendants. Similar historical photography discoveries. The Titanic camera discovery, while unprecedented in its scope and preservation quality, was not entirely without precedent. Throughout history, other remarkable photographic recoveries have occurred under extraordinary circumstances, each providing unique windows into historical moments once thought lost to time. Perhaps the closest parallel was the 1955 discovery of the Noronic collection, a waterproof camera case recovered from the SS Noronic, a passenger ship that burned in Toronto Harbor in 1949, claiming 118 lives. The case contained 37 exposed negatives taken by passenger Raymond Hartford during the ship's final voyage, including images taken just hours before the fire broke out. The Noronic photographs had been submerged for only 6 years, not a century, explained maritime archaeology photographer Jean-Pierre Lamarche. But they established an important precedent that disaster photography could be recovered and could significantly alter our understanding of historical events. The Hartford images revealed critical safety violations aboard the Neronic that hadn't been included in the official investigation, ultimately leading to retrospective changes in maritime safety regulations. Even more remarkable was the 1986 discovery of the icebox negatives from the 1924 British Mount Everest expedition. A small Kodak camera was found preserved in the frozen effects of climber Andrew Irvine, whose body was discovered preserved in ice along with that of his climbing partner, George Mallory. The recovered images, though severely degraded, included tantalizing evidence suggesting the pair might have reached the summit 29 years before Sir Edmund Hillary's officially recognized first ascent. Extreme environments, whether deep ocean pressures, Arctic ice, or desert dryness, can sometimes preserve photographic materials beyond their expected lifespan, explained conservation scientist Dr. Hartman. The Everest negatives in the Titanic film share this commonality, hostile environments ironically becoming preservative factors. Desert preservation yielded another extraordinary discovery in 2001 when archaeologists excavating a remote outpost in Egypt's western desert found a sealed tin box containing undeveloped film from a German reconnaissance unit operating during the North African campaign of World War II. The extremely dry conditions had prevented film degradation, and development revealed crucial intelligence photographs showing British troop movements that had never reached German headquarters due to the unit's capture. More recently, the 2010 recovery of the trapped miner's camera from the collapsed San Jose mine in Chile provided unique documentation of survival conditions during the 69 days that 33 miners were trapped underground before their famous rescue. One miner had brought a digital camera into the mine, and its memory card survived despite the harsh conditions. What distinguishes the Titanic discovery from these precedents is the combination of extreme age, perfect storm of preservation factors, and the iconic status of the event itself, noted Dr. Zhao. Previous recoveries involved newer photographic materials, less hostile environments, or events of more limited historical significance. Each of these discoveries shared a common impact. They transformed abstract historical events into immediate visual experiences, allowing modern viewers to connect directly with moments otherwise accessible only through written accounts. They also demonstrated how photographic evidence can challenge or confirm historical narratives, sometimes upending established understandings of events. Photography creates a unique kind of historical evidence, explained visual anthropologist Dr. Sarah Kempner. Unlike written accounts, which are always filtered through the writer's perspective, photographs capture moments exactly as they appeared, though always framed by the photographer's choices of subject and composition. Impact on Titanic research. The Guggenheim photographs catalyzed a fundamental reassessment of Titanic research methodologies, introducing visual evidence to a field previously dominated by oral histories, written accounts, and physical artifacts. This shift toward visual documentation transformed how researchers approached key questions about the disaster. Perhaps the most significant impact came in the field of evacuation studies, where the photographs provided unprecedented documentation of emergency management during a major maritime disaster. Dr. Vincent Pearson, a specialist in historical disaster response, explained, "Before these images, we relied on contradictory testimony about evacuation procedures. Now we can actually see Officer Lightoller's different approach compared to Murdoch's, analyze passenger movement patterns, and identify specific breakdowns in the evacuation chain. This visual evidence led to development of new computer models simulating the Titanic evacuation, incorporating previously unknown factors such as the documentation of passengers congregating away from loading areas and the uneven distribution of officers. These models have since been applied to modern cruise ship safety protocols, directly influencing contemporary maritime safety regulations. Architectural historians gained equally valuable insights from background details in the photographs. We can now confirm certain aspects of Titanic's interior design that were previously uncertain, noted Dr. Catherine Bellis, specialist in Edwardian-era ship architecture. The images reveal lighting configurations, decorative elements, and spatial arrangements that weren't adequately captured in the ship's plans or passenger descriptions. These architectural details allowed for more accurate reconstructions of the ship's interior spaces, correcting errors in previous models and providing reference points for authenticating artifacts recovered from the wreck site. Museum exhibitions worldwide updated their Titanic displays to incorporate these newly verified details. Social historians discovered perhaps the most nuanced revelations in the passenger interactions captured in the photographs. We can observe class boundaries both maintaining and dissolving during the crisis, explained Dr. Rebecca Hamilton, who specializes in social dynamics aboard passenger vessels. The photographs show third-class passengers being assisted by first-class gentlemen in some instances, contradicting simplified narratives of class-based discrimination, while other images confirm restrictions on movement between decks. This visual evidence of social dynamics aboard the sinking ship prompted research into previously overlooked passenger demographics and relationships. Genealogical researchers identified connections between passengers who appeared together in the photographs but hadn't previously been known to be traveling as companions. The images also transformed our understanding of the disaster's timeline, resolving long-standing debates about when certain events occurred. We can now pinpoint with minute precision when the first rockets were fired, when the band began playing on the boat deck, and when the forward funnel collapsed, explained Titanic chronologist Dr. Peter Willingham. This allows us to reconcile contradictions in survivor testimony that previously seemed irreconcilable. Perhaps most significantly, the photographs created new connections between academic research and public understanding of the disaster. Exhibitions featuring the images drew record attendance, with visitors spending 3 times longer engaging with displays containing the photographs compared to traditional artifact exhibits. These images transformed Titanic from historical event to visual reality for the public, noted museum studies researcher Dr. Claudia Fernandez. Visitors report stronger emotional connections and better retention of historical information when exposed to the photographs alongside traditional displays.